we would be more towards like the Catskills and like southern region of New York. If we go an hour north, we're in the Adirondacks, we're in like Tug Hill. So the soil can be so vastly different within the range that we're looking. So that could change a lot of our plans, at least kind of how we start our plans. We can grow pretty much anything anywhere within the zones, of course, of New York. Right now we're zone 5B. If we go south, we'd probably still be zone 5. If we go north, though, we can get into zone 4 and even zone 3. But we may have to do more soil building to be able to, grow a garden, things like that. So these are kind of general plans. Year 1, biggest thing, observe. This is what I'm considering year 1 is this year. The summer of 2025, we're hoping to be in the property, early summer. And we really want to observe it. That'll give us one full winter too before I actually plan to grow a garden, which I think will be really good. But we are going to start clearing any trees if necessary. Obviously, first and foremost though, is the house. So if the house needs a lot of work, that is obviously going to take our attention away from the property initially. But my hope is that year 1 we can start to, clear trees if necessary, and then start perennial spaces. Obviously, we know that if we plant a fruit tree today, it's still not going to produce for probably 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And we want to purchase a couple that are, our dog is right here. Sadie's hanging out with us. Hi, Sadie girl. We want to purchase a couple of really good trees, so, further along in their maturity level. My parents purchased a couple trees from a local nursery, and they literally came with fruit on them. They got peach trees that had peaches on them, and they got apple trees that had apples on them. Now, obviously, they're then going to probably take a year off from producing, but still, so you have at least 2 to 3 years before you're getting any kind of production. And so the sooner we get perennials in the ground, the better, and the sooner we'll have be able to harvest from them. So fruit trees such as apples, pears, peaches, cherries, bushes like blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, things like strawberries, and asparagus. I'm not saying I'm going to be able to start everything this year. If we can get a couple fruit trees in the ground and some bare root strawberries planted and some asparagus, I would be pretty happy. So I am well aware that, yes, I want all these fruit trees, but year 1, a couple of maybe each, or at least a couple apple trees and a couple peach trees to start, and then build every year from there on. We want to get layers, laying chickens right away. That's something that is not really something we want to wait on. Obviously, some of that will depend on whether there's a structure on the property that we can use as a chicken coop, or if that's something we have to add. But we do want to get layers pretty much right away because we don't want to be without eggs for very long. With bird flu and egg shortages and egg prices, we don't want to be without eggs. We will obviously have to be without eggs for a short time. We do actually plan on getting rid of our layers, we decided, just prior to actually listing our house. Our neighbor's going to take them. And some of them she will probably process, the older ones, and then the younger ones she'll keep for her layers. But we want to go ahead and get layers, so we will still be, even with getting them immediately when we buy a new house, we'll be without layers from the time we list our house until the time we close on a new house, at least. And I'd like to start setting up some kind of composting system the first year. That could be just like a small pile area where we throw scraps and we can put chicken bedding initially. But I want to get that started immediately so that we can start building compost for the future years. Year 2 is my starting a garden year. If in year 1, I'm not saying we're going to have a garden. Don't worry, Matt. I'm not saying I'm having a garden year 1. That's my husband. He'd be like, slow down. If in year 1, we can kind of figure out where we want to have a garden without rushing it, I would like to get a silage chart and put that down so that it's just more ready for the next year. But if that's not the case, that is totally fine, and we can just start fresh the next year. But year 2, I definitely want to have a garden. That garden is not going to be my 15,000 square foot garden that I had here. That garden is going to be significantly smaller. It's still going to be a good size, but it's not going to be massive. I would like a 50 foot by 100 foot garden, which is 5,000 square feet. That is much more manageable for one person to be managing. That still gives me space where I can have squashes that are going to vine out and take up a big chunk of space. But starting small is going to give me a lot more time and give myself a lot more grace to learn the soil, stay on top of weeds, and actually produce more food. One of the first years we were here, I had a small garden right in our backyard, and it was one of the most fruitful gardens I've had. And it was significantly smaller than my gigantic garden that I ended up having. So starting small is the best way to learn the soil and be able to just kind of stay on top of it and figure out the weeds and all those things. So it'll be smaller, but it's still going to be a decent size. We would, year 2, like to add meat animals back into the homestead, being that we are going to have 1 full year with no meat production. That's kind of a big deal. We have a lot of meat currently, and we will still purchase our beef, so we will still have beef at some point. And my husband will still hunt next year, or this year, 2025. But it's probably gonna be a lot less than we've had in years past. We won't have meat chickens, we won't have pigs, things like that. So year 2, I would like to add meat chickens back in, as well as have pigs on the property. Whether that means silvopasturing, pasturing the pigs through woods, even pasturing the meat chickens through woods, or having space where we can actually have them out on pasture, we'll see. But I would like to add, a couple meat pigs and some meat chickens to get our meat production back up and running. We also would like to add bees to the property again. I do think all of my bees, unfortunately, are deceased. I was really late winterizing with everything, trying to list the house in this past summer. And I didn't do what I should have done. I didn't treat them for mites, things like that. And so unfortunately, I do think they're all deceased. We are going to hold out hope that maybe some of them are alive, but I'm not super hopeful. And if they are alive, great, we will bring them with us year 1, obviously. But if they are not, year 2 is when we will add bees back to the property. And take it slow with those 2. I actually only want to start with 2 hives, and kind of leave it. I don't really want to get up above 4 hives ever again. When I'm just doing it for ourselves, more than 4 is completely unnecessary. And then in the future, what are our long-term goals? Biggest thing for me is like building soil, making sure that our production can be at the highest point, for the garden, for the fruit trees, all those things. I want to incorporate using animals to help build the soil, whether that mean like pasturing our meat chickens around the fruit trees, things like that. Adding really good compost systems. Currently, we just have a pile that we add to. We don't really rotate it a ton. We use 2 different piles. 1 year we'll add to this pile, and then we'll let that sit, and then we'll add to another pile and just rotate. But I'd like it to be a much more efficient system, and I want to look into other composting systems that would work well for a small homestead. We want to add in rotational grazing, making sure that we have good pastures for our animals. I would love to add in meat rabbits in the future, but that could be years out. I don't know enough about them currently to really feel like I could do it well. We want to add to our fruit trees, add to our orchards year after year, so that we get to a point where we have, a significant orchard that will kind of meet all of our needs for our fruit. And maybe in the future, dairy animals. I would love some dairy goats. That's something.
I want a cow.
You want a cow? I do want a cow too, but I'm actually terrified of cows, so I don't think that's anything realistic.
Aww.
Maybe. We'll see. But I would love some dairy goats. I would love to have some dairy on the farm, around the homestead eventually. That's it for our plans for the first couple years at least. This may be like 5 years worth of plans that I'm really compressing down into like 2 or 3 years. But that's because I'm always overzealous with things. And we do want to make sure we do it right this time. I don't want to rush things and put things in places and then end up wanting to move them a year or 2 later. So observe, take our time, grow slowly, increase the gardens as we need to, as we see fit, and manageable. I don't want to increase the garden, double it in size the second year and then not be able to stay on top of it like I have in the past. So those are our first few year plans for the new homestead. And obviously we will bring you guys along for the whole process. Hopefully we'll be listing our house here in the next couple months and start our search for our forever property. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. Remember, we're going today for a better tomorrow. Please like and subscribe and join me on the next one.